March 1915, London trembled under the weight of distant news carried by telegrams that spoke of disaster across the sea. Merchant convoys bound for Britain's shores were vanishing beneath the grey Atlantic, claimed by unseen predators stalking in silence. German U-boats, engineered with precision and stealth, now prowled the shipping lanes with ruthless efficiency that defied conventional naval defense. Every sunrise brought grim reports of another freighter lost, another crew drowned, another family left waiting for letters that would never arrive. The British Admiralty, burdened by responsibility and constrained by disbelief, confronted an enemy it could neither see nor hear beneath the ocean's opaque surface. Periscopes breached like ghosts, torpedoes struck without warning, and steel hulls collapsed under pressures both mechanical and psychological. Britain's survival hinged on these convoys, for within their holds rested wheat, coal, and oil, lifelines for an island empire now starving toward desperation. When calculations showed Britain had scarcely 6 weeks of food reserves, panic disguised itself as bureaucratic calm within Admiralty corridors. Scientific committees debated new methods of detection, though most dismissed acoustic research as folly unworthy of serious funding or attention. Sound, after all, was considered imprecise, unreliable, and too easily distorted by turbulent waves and shifting depths. Yet beneath that atmosphere of skepticism, within a dim workshop at University College London, a blind physicist listened to what others refused to hear. Dr. Robert Boyle, trained in both physics and patience, possessed neither the luxury of sight nor the permission of doubt. Where others saw chaos, he heard order, a hidden symphony within the sea's noise waiting to be understood. Boyle believed that every vessel, every propeller, and every submerged object generated a distinct acoustic fingerprint echoing through water's density. By interpreting those vibrations, he reasoned, one could map invisible movement and identify what human eyes could never observe. His concept defied established naval science and challenged the limits of perception itself. While others read equations upon chalkboards, Boyle read vibrations upon the walls, feeling rhythm where silence dominated. The Admiralty dismissed him initially, labeling his idea scientifically impossible, yet his conviction deepened each time another ship vanished without trace. As Britain faced ruin and morale withered beneath cold statistics of tonnage lost, Boyle's quest transformed from experiment to necessity. He vowed to build a machine that could hear death before it struck, saving the empire through sound alone. Kindly like, share, and subscribe for more forgotten stories of genius that changed history forever. April 1915. The grey skies over Portsmouth mirrored the uncertainty shadowing Britain's naval future as storms gathered above the Channel. Within the cluttered halls of the Portsmouth Naval Yard, Admiralty engineers argued over blueprints, debating which technological miracle might deliver salvation from German U-boats. Amid those voices of skepticism entered Dr. Robert Boyle, guided not by sight but by sound, stepping cautiously through corridors that smelled of oil, salt, and disbelief. His blindness, caused by an accident years earlier, had not dulled his intellect but sharpened every sensory substitute into an instrument of extraordinary precision. He carried in his hands a modest brass tube connected by wires to fragile quartz crystals that shimmered faintly under electric charge. The device, he explained calmly, could send out vibrations underwater and detect their returning echoes from distant objects. To officers schooled in tradition and warfare rather than acoustics, Boyle's words seemed poetic rather than practical, an illusion constructed by a man driven more by curiosity than necessity. They whispered among themselves that he could not possibly succeed, for sound waves lost strength too quickly and reflections blurred within chaotic seas. Yet Boyle, undeterred by disbelief, requested nothing more than an opportunity to demonstrate proof through experiment. When the first trial commenced inside the naval basin, engineers observed as Boyle lowered his contraption into the water, every movement deliberate and unshaken. The device emitted a faint hum followed by measured pulses, and moments later subtle oscillations returned across the connected galvanometer needle. Where others saw random noise, Boyle interpreted pattern, detecting the presence of a steel plate submerged several yards away. The demonstration lasted only minutes, but within those minutes a new science emerged quietly beneath skeptical stares. It was the birth of active sonar, though the term itself had not yet been conceived. Despite that promising moment, the Admiralty remained cautious, unwilling to allocate resources toward what they called experimental optimism. Funding was restricted, workshops were limited, and Boyle found himself relying on scavenged materials salvaged from decommissioned ships. Still, within that adversity, his determination solidified into resolve. For blindness had taught him that clarity came not from vision, but from persistence. Each evening, as night descended over the shipyard and waves whispered against stone docks, Boyle continued refining his equations by touch and intuition. His belief in sound as salvation became his rebellion against an empire's disbelief. May 1915, within the dim laboratory of University College London, Robert Boyle's workspace resembled both a battlefield and a symphony hall of scientific persistence. Oscillographs hummed faintly, coils of wire intertwined across tables, and shallow water tanks rippled under the rhythm of controlled vibrations. Boyle's blindness compelled him to rely on sound's intricate language, hearing frequencies that ordinary minds ignored, perceiving harmony within chaos. Each droplet that struck metal, each resonance that lingered longer than expected, carried meaning only he could translate into mathematical precision. He experimented with quartz crystals, those seemingly inert minerals that possessed the extraordinary ability to convert electrical energy into mechanical vibration. Through patient calibration and endless repetition, Boyle discovered that certain frequencies, when transmitted through water, reflected predictably upon striking dense materials such as steel. The returning waves, faint but measurable, created acoustic signatures distinguishable from random underwater turbulence. It was not mere speculation, but a foundation for what would soon become the world's first active sonar principle. Though his instruments were primitive, their results defied assumption, revealing that water itself could carry secrets across vast distances. Boyle documented each test meticulously, transcribing oscillation curves into notebooks filled with equations written in raised graphite for tactile reading. He could not see the patterns, yet his fingertips recognized resonance shifts invisible to those relying solely on sight. Through comparative analysis, he deduced that frequency modulation controlled detection depth, while amplitude determined reflection strength, establishing the mathematical groundwork for acoustic range estimation. Every discovery demanded verification, yet resources dwindled as war consumed Britain's industrial capacity. Still, Boyle persevered, knowing each successful experiment narrowed the chasm between imagination and military acceptance. The broader scientific community dismissed his theories, insisting that underwater sound behaved too erratically to serve tactical purposes. They cited refraction layers, thermal gradients, and ambient marine noise as insurmountable obstacles undermining reliability. But Boyle countered through empirical demonstration, constructing small-scale models replicating submarine hull curvature to study echo dispersion. Each session concluded with data proving that despite distortion, consistent wave behavior could indeed reveal position and distance. His colleagues, once doubtful, began whispering that he might have discovered something transformative, an acoustic counterpart to radar long before its conception. By late summer, Boyle's experiments transcended academic inquiry and entered wartime urgency. The physics of echo had transformed from curiosity into weapon, offering Britain its first scientific hope against invisible predators beneath the sea. June 1915, Whitehall AS corridors resonated with polished boots and whispered caution as Admiralty officials debated funding priorities amid growing maritime losses. Britain's naval bureaucracy, rooted deeply in centuries of tradition, viewed theoretical experimentation as indulgence when steel, coal, and discipline were already scarce. Dr. Robert Boyle's sonic invention, though remarkable in concept, confronted resistance from those convinced that mechanical sound detection could never rival human judgment or periscope vigilance. In an era dominated by visual warfare, the notion of hearing submarines appeared closer to fantasy than strategy. and skepticism became institutional policy disguised as prudence. Boyle's reports, thick with data and acoustic readings, circulated across committees where admirals dismissed them as impractical wartime distractions. The technical vocabulary of frequency resonance, amplitude calibration, and echo time analysis seemed foreign to officers accustomed to maps and munitions. Several naval engineers argued that oceanic noise, caused by currents, storms, and even marine life, would drown any usable signal before reaching detection range. Impossible, one reviewer declared, stamping the document with red ink, a symbolic rejection of science that threatened established hierarchies. Yet beneath bureaucratic rigidity, a few quiet allies recognized the potential buried within Boyle's persistence and advocated for limited continuation. The Admiralty's official correspondence granted him modest laboratory access but denied substantial field trials, effectively stalling advancement under the guise of caution. Funds barely covered replacement equipment, forcing Boyle to construct transducers from salvaged copper wire and improvised insulation materials. He spent long nights recalibrating his apparatus by touch, guided only by auditory feedback and memory of waveforms once traced across instruments. Each failed attempt reinforced his conviction that progress required endurance against both scientific uncertainty and administrative neglect. The true battle, he realized, was not fought against submarines, but disbelief entrenched within those commanding Britain's defense. Outside official circles, whispers spread through the scientific community that the blind physicist's persistence bordered on obsession. Yet Boyle's colleagues, aware of his unwavering discipline, saw in him a reflection of the broader wartime struggle, a determination to create order amid overwhelming darkness. His blindness became metaphorical armor, shielding him from distractions of doubt that blinded others through fear. Though the Admiralty offered no praise, Boyle pressed onward, convinced that empirical truth required no validation from rank or tradition. By mid-year, he resolved to prove his invention where theory met consequence, at sea itself, planning secret trials that would either silence ridicule forever or confirm every skeptic's dismissal. August 1915, the cold Scottish air hung heavy above the Firth of Forth as dawn revealed mist curling across anchored warships. Within that grey stillness, Dr. Robert Boyle stood aboard a small naval tender, surrounded by instruments, assembled from borrowed components and improvised wiring. Officially, this voyage was routine equipment testing, yet beneath the secrecy lay his most daring experiment: the first attempt to detect a submerged submarine through sound alone. A handful of skeptical officers observed silently, their expressions balanced between curiosity and quiet derision. None expected success, for the sea had humbled every previous attempt at acoustic detection. Boyle's assistant carefully lowered the cylindrical transducer into the water, its polished surface reflecting faint glimmers of early sunlight. Electrical current surged through quartz crystals, producing ultrasonic vibrations that rippled outward into the depths like invisible searchlights. Every man aboard listened as the instrument emitted rhythmic pulses, a mechanical heartbeat echoing through the still morning. Seconds stretched into tense silence before the galvanometer needle quivered, responding faintly to something deep beneath the surface. Boyle leaned forward, fingers tracing the instrument's subtle tremors, interpreting patterns no one else could perceive. He whispered readings, translating vibration into distance, confirming the presence of an object far below. Unbeknownst to the observing officers, a Royal Navy submarine lay hidden 2 miles away, submerged deliberately for the test. When Boyle announced the bearing and approximate range with remarkable accuracy, disbelief gave way to stunned silence. The tender repositioned, repeated the experiment, and again the echo returned precisely from the submarine's direction. The results were undeniable. Sound had found steel beneath an ocean that once concealed everything. For the first time in recorded history, human technology had seen underwater through reflected vibration, marking the birth of an entirely new scientific domain. The demonstration concluded under strict confidentiality, and reports were sealed to prevent premature disclosure to the press or enemy intelligence. Officers congratulated Boyle cautiously, still unsure whether his breakthrough represented isolated luck or repeatable innovation. Yet the data spoke clearly, and his reputation among select Admiralty scientists began to shift from eccentric theorist to indispensable pioneer. For Boyle, triumph arrived not as applause but as validation that perseverance could pierce both darkness and disbelief. His discovery, born in obscurity and tested amid secrecy, would soon reshape naval warfare by granting Britain an acoustic weapon unseen, yet profoundly powerful. October 1915, as autumn winds swept across London's rooftops, Robert Boyle returned from Scotland carrying results that both thrilled and burdened him. The Admiralty's acknowledgement remained muted, clouded by bureaucracy and competing priorities, yet the data he gathered whispered undeniable truth. The echo phenomenon was real, measurable, and repeatable, proof that underwater detection through sound was not fantasy, but functioning science. Still, with the war consuming Britain's treasury, official enthusiasm faded quickly, and Boyle's equipment was returned to storage under the label pending further evaluation. For a lesser man, such indifference might have ended ambition, yet Boyle's blindness had taught resilience deeper than disappointment. He resumed work inside his modest laboratory, a converted storeroom filled with cables, oscillators, and the faint scent of burned insulation. Using salvaged electrical components, he refined transducers capable of generating higher frequencies and greater directional precision. Every adjustment demanded mathematical recalculation, performed mentally and verified through vibration patterns traced upon metal plates. His assistant, ever loyal, recorded readings aloud as Boyle listened intently, perceiving subtle variations invisible even to those with sight. Hours turned into nights as he mapped the relationship between signal frequency and water temperature, gradually perfecting calibration methods necessary for consistent detection across varying depths. By early winter, he succeeded in developing a dual receiver configuration enabling triangulation, the first practical means of determining not only distance but also direction of submerged targets. It was an elegant solution born from necessity, translating sound differentials into positional geometry with remarkable accuracy. His findings reached sympathetic engineers within the Royal Navy's Research Division, some of whom recognized the design's potential for immediate wartime application. Quietly, they arranged funding for continued experimentation under the guise of communications development, shielding Boyle's work from further administrative interference. What began as personal perseverance was slowly transforming into national priority cloaked beneath secrecy. Boyle's blindness, once viewed as limitation, became symbolic strength, granting him clarity unclouded by convention or hierarchy. He operated not through eyesight, but intuition shaped by rigorous analysis, hearing order within confusion, science within chaos. Each pulse transmitted through his apparatus became testimony to human adaptability under pressure. As U-boat attacks intensified during the winter campaign, Boyle's progress offered faint yet vital hope that Britain might soon turn the tide through technology. Though his name remained unknown beyond closed laboratory doors, his invention's pulse had already begun resonating across the Empire's uncertain future. February 1916, the Royal Navy destroyer HMS Falknor departed Portsmouth Harbour under grey morning skies, carrying an experimental apparatus hidden beneath its deck. Few aboard understood its significance, for the device was listed merely as hydroacoustic receiver, a vague term masking revolutionary purpose. Robert Boyle, absent from the voyage due to health restrictions, listened from London as reports arrived through encrypted telegrams. His design, now refined with dual quartz transducers and calibrated amplifiers, was about to undergo its first operational test against the unseen predators haunting British waters. The stakes extended far beyond science. If successful, the invention could save countless lives and preserve the Empire's maritime arteries from collapse. At sea, engineers activated the instrument, transmitting a rhythmic pulse that echoed faintly through the ship's hull like a mechanical heartbeat. The receiving needle flickered gently, then steadied as returning vibrations reached the amplifier, translating sound into measurable motion Moments later, the operators observed distinct oscillations aligning with a known submarine target positioned for testing several miles away. For the first time, a British warship heard an enemy beneath the waves before visual confirmation, achieving what admirals once declared impossible. Data logged from successive tests confirmed consistent range accuracy exceeding 3 miles, establishing a new frontier in naval detection. Word of success traveled quietly through Admiralty circles, sparking both intrigue and renewed caution among senior officers wary of overpromising technological miracles. Yet those who witnessed the demonstration recognized its profound implications. The ocean's silence had been broken, and for the first time in history, sound became weapon and shield simultaneously. The system's precision, though imperfect, provided valuable warning time against submarine ambushes, transforming tactics once governed by guesswork into strategies guided by science. Engineers refined mechanical components to withstand constant vibration while adjusting frequency output to penetrate varying salinity conditions encountered across Atlantic routes. Boyle, upon receiving the results, felt neither triumph nor vindication, but solemn affirmation that persistence could indeed alter destiny. His invention had transcended theoretical pursuit and entered the machinery of war where consequences measured not applause but survival. Newspapers never mentioned his name, for secrecy demanded silence around such advancements. Yet within naval archives, his work was now coded Priority Research, Acoustic Detection. Britain, long blind beneath the sea, had finally opened its mechanical eyes through sound. The Empire's endurance, once fading with every sinking ship, found renewed strength in the quiet rhythm of Boyle's creation. April 1917, the Atlantic convoy stretched across cold, hostile waters, where the horizon blurred between life and disappearance beneath relentless waves. German U-boats, emboldened by years of success, prowled unseen along supply routes, hunting merchant ships with calculated patience and devastating precision. Britain's losses mounted with grim consistency, each explosion marking another ton of cargo vanished into the abyss. Yet within this chaos, a quiet revolution unfolded aboard select Royal Navy escorts fitted with Robert Boyle's evolving sound detection system. The device, refined through months of adjustment, now transformed silence into warning, allowing ships to anticipate rather than endure the enemy's strike. Crews trained under strict secrecy to interpret acoustic readings, learning to distinguish between harmless marine echoes and the steady pulse of submarine propellers. Headphones pressed against their ears, operators listened as rhythmic vibrations painted invisible maps across the ocean floor. Every signal carried meaning, some false, some fatal, but over time, experience refined instinct into science. When a faint oscillation aligned with expected bearing and distance, destroyers altered course, dropping depth charges precisely upon coordinates once impossible to calculate. Each confirmed kill validated Boyle's vision, proving that blind innovation could indeed protect sighted nations. Reports from convoy commanders described encounters where submarines, once hunters, became hunted, forced to dive deeper or retreat entirely. The sound device, though limited by weather and interference, extended Britain's defensive reach far beyond visual detection, buying critical seconds that often meant survival. Word spread among German crews of new British ships that seemed to hear danger approaching, and superstition soon turned to fear within the U-boat ranks. The ocean, once their sanctuary, grew treacherous as echoes betrayed their presence with ruthless precision. Boyle's invention, conceived in solitude, had become the Empire's unseen guardian beneath storm-lashed waves. Still, technological triumph demanded continued secrecy. Few outside naval intelligence knew the system's true origin. Admiralty memoranda referred to it cryptically as ASD, anti-submarine device, concealing Boyle's authorship behind layers of classification. He continued refining the design quietly, improving amplification circuits to counter background noise and expanding detection range beyond previous limits. By year's end, his acoustic principles were installed across multiple fleets, forming the foundation of coordinated submarine defense. The Empire's survival, once balanced upon faith and fortitude, now rested upon vibration and velocity, proof that sound itself had become the weapon that saved Britain from silent extinction. November 1918, the armistice echoed across a battered Europe while naval ships anchored silently, their engines cooling after years of relentless duty. Beneath that quiet victory, few remembered the blind physicist whose invention had shifted the balance of an oceanic war. Robert Boyle, working without fanfare, watched his creation transition from wartime necessity into scientific foundation, guiding future generations toward new horizons of acoustic exploration. The ASD system, renamed and refined, would soon evolve into what the world would recognize as active sonar, an indispensable instrument for peace, discovery, and defense alike. His theories, once dismissed as fantasy, now formed the core of naval research departments across continents rebuilding their fleets from ruin. Boyle's post-war correspondence reveals humility, not pride, describing his contribution as a matter of physics, not heroism, though history would later disagree. His methods inspired laboratories from Halifax to Tokyo to replicate his quartz resonance experiments, producing increasingly sophisticated underwater detection instruments. Governments invested heavily in research once neglected, converting secrecy into progress and military invention into civil science. Deep-sea cartography, geological surveying, and marine biology all benefited from the echoes that once saved convoys, turning war's desperation into civilization's advancement. Boyle's blindness, once his barrier, became metaphorical illumination for an entire field born from sound rather than sight. Within academic circles, physicists studied his manuscripts meticulously, tracing the evolution from primitive transducers to directional sonar arrays capable of detecting submerged vessels across astonishing distances. His formulas, though handwritten in uneven lines, contained conceptual clarity unmatched even by later technological refinements. The Admiralty eventually acknowledged his role discreetly, granting him commendation within classified documents that surfaced decades later when restrictions finally lifted. By then, the Royal Navy, AS fleets, operated fully equipped with sonar systems bearing direct lineage to Boyle's first experimental designs tested upon the Firth of Forth. Historians now regard him not merely as inventor, but as architect of underwater perception, a man who transformed vibration into vision through unwavering faith in science. His story encapsulates the paradox of wartime innovation, how instruments forged for survival become tools of exploration, guiding humanity deeper into understanding the natural world. From detecting submarines to mapping continental shelves, Boyle's principles underpin every sonar pulse traveling today beneath restless seas. Though his name faded into obscurity amid grander wartime legends, his echoes endure eternally within every frequency that reveals what lies unseen beneath the deep. Spring 1923. A soft drizzle fell over London's Bloomsbury district as Robert Boyle walked slowly through the university courtyard, guided by his assistant. His steps were measured, each cane tap echoing faintly against the cobblestones, the same rhythm that once carried through the Atlantic to save countless lives. The war had ended years earlier, yet its ghosts lingered beneath the sea, silent steel graves resting within darkness, where his invention once listened for enemies. Boyle, older and frailer, spoke rarely of his achievement, considering it duty rather than discovery, contribution rather than conquest. But those who knew him recognized that his quiet persistence had altered the trajectory of naval warfare and scientific understanding forever. Across the empire, laboratories expanded his work, converting crude prototypes into refined sonar instruments capable of mapping entire ocean floors. Each generation improved range, precision, and clarity, yet the underlying principle remained the same: the art of hearing beyond perception. In time, submarines, research vessels, and exploration craft would depend entirely upon systems born from Boyle's experiments, tracing echoes where light could never travel. Nations built fleets equipped with his legacy, navigating safely through storm and shadow alike. He never patented his invention, believing knowledge should belong to those who needed it most, not those seeking profit. When Boyle passed away in quiet obscurity, newspapers granted only brief mention, noting the death of a noted physicist, without acknowledging his revolutionary gift. His blindness, once his perceived weakness, became history's ultimate irony, for through sound he granted vision to navies across the world. Those who inherited his technology rarely spoke his name, yet every sonar ping that pierced the oceanic abyss carried fragments of his genius across generations. Beneath polar ice, within research submarines, and across distant exploration vessels, the same echoes that once defended an island nation continued illuminating unseen worlds. Today, historians describe Robert Boyle as the man who taught humanity to listen to the sea. His story embodies the timeless truth that progress demands defiance against disbelief, perseverance against limitation, and courage against ridicule. He heard possibility within impossibility, transforming silence into salvation during humanity's darkest hours. From blindness emerged insight, from solitude arose sound, and from determination was born the voice of the ocean itself. His invention outlived empires, wars, and memories, yet its pulse endures, steady, patient, eternal, within every depth, where echoes still answer those who dare to listen.